James Carter was used to controlling everything until the day life crashed into him, literally. A rainy Boston street, a concussion, and an unexpected visit to the ER turned his world upside down. But what shook him more than the accident was who he saw next. Emily, his ex-wife, the woman he hadn't spoken to in 6 years. But she wasn't alone. A little boy sat beside her, gray-blue eyes, quiet strength, and a face James instantly recognized, because it looked just like his. As James pieces together the truth, he must confront betrayal, lost time, and a son he never knew existed. Will he be too late to make things right? Tap in now, because some second chances only come once. Subscribe for more real, raw, and unforgettable stories. It had been 6 years since James Carter had seen Emily Brooks, and he wasn't supposed to see her now, not like this. The rain in Boston that night came hard, wild sheets hammering against his windshield as he pulled out of the tunnel on Storrow Drive. His Bluetooth buzzed with boardroom updates and legal fallout from the failed merger, but his mind wasn't on the numbers, not tonight. He'd barely seen the other car. The impact sent a violent jolt through his chest, the seatbelt yanking him back as his luxury sedan spun into a guardrail. The last thing he heard before the airbags deployed was the soft shatter of glass and metal folding in on itself. Hours later, James blinked under harsh fluorescent lights, blinking through the gauze of pain. A nurse with kind eyes leaned over him. "Mr. Carter, you were lucky. Minor concussion, nothing broken. You're at Massachusetts General." He nodded absently, trying to piece together what had happened. But then he heard it. A soft, steady voice, somewhere just beyond the curtain separating his bed from the hallway. A woman reading aloud, her tone calm and familiar. And the brave little robot kept searching for the stars, even when the sky had no moon. James turned his head slowly. That voice, it couldn't be. He pushed the curtain aside, the IV tugging uncomfortably at his arm. His eyes found her instantly, Emily. Her hair was shorter, curled tighter against her face, and there were faint lines near her eyes, but it was her, no mistaking it. She wore navy scrubs, a badge clipped to her collar. She was seated beside a small hospital bed reading to a little boy in dinosaur pajamas. The boy was maybe 5, maybe 6. His legs were tucked up under the blanket, and he clutched a battered stuffed elephant to his chest. James's breath caught. He looked just like him. Same gray-blue eyes, same furrowed brow when listening, same damn cowlick. Emily turned as if sensing him. Her voice died mid-sentence. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. James took a step forward, his voice hoarse. "Emily?" Her face paled, her lips parting in shock. "James?" The boy looked up sleepily. "Mommy, who's that?" Emily stood quickly, placing herself between them. "Noah, it's just someone I used to know. Try to rest, okay?" Noah. His name was Noah. James stared at her, his heart thundering in his ears. "Is he—" Emily gave a tight shake of her head, almost pleading. "Not here, not now." But James couldn't tear his eyes from the boy. "How old is he?" "James," her voice broke. "Please, let's talk outside." He followed her down the hall to a quiet waiting area, adrenaline keeping him upright. The hospital buzzed with the low hum of machines and murmured conversations, but in that moment, the world narrowed to just them. "You never told me," James said softly. "I tried," Emily replied, her voice trembling. "But your mother—" "Don't," he interrupted. "Not yet. Just tell me the truth. Is he mine?" Emily looked away, wiping at her eyes. "Yes." Silence fell again, heavy and raw. James sank into a chair, running a hand down his face. God. I have a son. Emily sat across from him, shoulders hunched. I didn't want it to be like this, I swear. I sent letters, called. I begged her to tell you. He looked up sharply. My mother? She nodded. She offered me money to leave. Said if I cared about your future, I'd disappear. And then I stopped fighting. I just focused on Noah. James stared at the floor, his world unraveling thread by thread. Why didn't you come back? I was scared, Emily whispered. Scared you'd hate me, that you'd think I was trying to trap you. I didn't want Noah to be a burden. James's voice cracked. He's not. He's not. Their eyes met, and in that fragile silence, everything began to shift. Emily stood. He's got asthma. He loves dinosaurs, and he thinks Pluto should still be a planet. You want to know more? Be here, but not like this. Not as James Carter, CEO. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind her words. Okay. As she turned to go, James whispered, Emily. She paused. Thank you for raising him. Emily didn't look back, but he saw her shoulders shake slightly just before she disappeared behind the doors. And James sat there, alone in a hospital hallway, the rain still streaking down the windows. He hadn't just survived a crash tonight. He'd collided with the truth, and nothing in his world would ever be the same. The night after his hospital release, James Carter couldn't sleep. His penthouse on Beacon Hill, normally silent and sterile, felt louder than ever. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled far off over the Charles. And all he could think about were those gray-blue eyes staring up at Emily, the way Noah had curled into her side, and the impossible truth that he'd missed 5 years of his son's life. His son. It felt too big to say out loud, like he didn't have the right. James had spent his life mastering control, of markets, of companies, of conversations. But in the face of a 6-year-old boy with matching eyes and asthma, all of that power meant nothing. By morning, he was outside Emily's apartment building in Jamaica Plain. It was older, brick-faced, with uneven stone steps. A blue tricycle leaned against the railing. James stood there awkwardly, holding a small bag filled with children's books and a stuffed space shuttle he'd picked up from a toy store just as it opened. Emily answered after the second knock. She didn't look surprised to see him, just exhausted. Hi, he said, voice low. You're persistent. I'm a CEO. It's kind of my thing. That almost earned a smile. She stepped aside. Noah's watching a cartoon in the living room. You can stay for a while, but keep your promises. James walked inside slowly. The apartment was modest but warm. Framed finger paintings on the wall, a scent of coffee and lemon cleaner, and a blanket tent near the couch. Noah peeked up from his cartoon, clutching the same stuffed elephant. His eyes locked with James's. Hey, buddy, James said gently. Mind if I hang out? Noah shrugged. Only if you don't change the channel. Deal. James settled on the floor, careful to keep a small distance. He placed the space shuttle beside Noah, who eyed it curiously before pulling it into his lap. Cool, the boy murmured. They sat in silence for a while, the show's theme song playing softly in the background. Emily watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Later, over coffee at the dining table, she finally broke the quiet. What are you doing, James? He didn't flinch. Trying. To be what, exactly? A dad? You don't even know him. No, but I want to, if you'll let me. Emily sighed, her fingers tracing circles on her mug. This isn't a photo op, James. It's not something you can fix with a press release. I'm not here for a headline. You weren't here at all. James looked down, guilt twisting in his chest. I didn't know, Emily. I swear to God, I didn't know. And if you had, I would have shown up. I would have fought for you, for him. Her eyes flicked to his, sharp and skeptical. "Would you have stood up to your mother? To Margaret Carter?" James stiffened. "You talked to her?" "She talked at me. The day I showed up at your office 6 years ago, she was waiting in the lobby. Said she'd take care of everything, that you didn't need complications." James's jaw clenched. "She lied to both of us." "She gave me a check," Emily said bitterly, "and an NDA." He froze. "You signed it?" "I had rent due, no job, no insurance. I was 3 months pregnant and terrified." James swallowed hard, throat thick. "I'm so sorry. I didn't want your money. I wanted a partner, but I wasn't going to raise our son resenting you, so I let you go." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Finally, James reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. "I've already started the paperwork to remove Margaret from the company board. She doesn't get to dictate my life anymore." Emily blinked. "You'd do that? For us?" "I'd do it for Noah." From the living room, a voice called out, "Mom, can Mr. James come to the park with us today?" Emily hesitated. James looked at her gently. "May I?" After a long pause, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "But today, he's not Mr. James. Today, you're just someone learning how to be a dad." James smiled softly. "That sounds perfect." And, as they stepped into the soft afternoon light, trailing behind a boy with a spaceship in one hand and a future wide open ahead of him, something in James shifted. For the first time, he wasn't chasing legacy. He was chasing love. It was just a park, a rusted set of swings, and a patchy field where kids chased pigeons more than each other. But to James Carter, it might as well have been a sacred arena, where every step he took, every word he spoke, was being quietly weighed by a 6-year-old judge with his eyes and his name tucked away in a birth certificate he hadn't known existed. Noah was busy climbing the jungle gym, his space shuttle gripped in one hand, daring gravity to challenge his enthusiasm. James followed closely, not hovering, but never far. "You don't like slides?" Noah asked, halfway up a wobbly ladder. "I'm more of a swings guy," James replied, smiling. "Besides, I think you'd beat me in a race to the bottom." "Obviously," Noah said, smugly, and zipped down. From a nearby bench, Emily watched. She hadn't brought a book, hadn't pulled out her phone. She was watching intently, guardedly, but not coldly. The lines at the corners of her eyes were deeper than he remembered, but they framed the same fierce spirit he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. After 10 minutes of breathless play, Noah came running up with a proposition. "Can we get ice cream after this?" James glanced at Emily, whose face didn't betray an answer. "I think we can work that into the schedule," James said carefully. "Awesome, but no raisins this time." "Noah?" Emily interjected softly. "That was oatmeal, and we don't yell at desserts." James chuckled. "Fair rule." As they walked to the corner ice cream truck, Noah bouncing between them, James felt a strange rhythm start to form. He wasn't leading this, he wasn't in control, but for once, that didn't bother him. At the truck, he bought 3 cones, chocolate for Noah, mint chip for Emily, and plain vanilla for himself. They sat on a stone ledge under a tree that was just beginning to turn gold for fall. Noah licked his cone with a total focus, then looked up and asked, "Were you sad when you didn't know about me?" James hesitated. The words caught like gravel in his throat. "Yes," he said finally. "I didn't know what I was missing, but now I do, and I don't want to miss another day." Noah tilted his head, considering that. "Okay, but you gotta learn my bedtime story voices." "I'm up for the challenge." Beside him, Emily said nothing, but her hand brushed his for a moment. Unintentional, maybe, or maybe not. She pulled it back quickly, focusing on her cone. Later that night, after dropping them off, James sat in his car outside the apartment for a long while. He stared up at their window, the faint flicker of a TV show casting shadows across the curtain, and he realized something painful. He could lose this again. Emily could change her mind. A judge could rule against him. Margaret could find some twisted legal play, some clause buried in a trust document or board directive. For the first time in years, James felt vulnerable. Not to failure, but to love. The next morning, he called his legal team. "I need you to look into guardianship laws in Massachusetts. Quietly. I don't want Emily blindsided. I just want to know what protections I have and what rights I don't." "Understood, sir," his lawyer replied, "and find out what Margaret's up to. If she's been involved with anything concerning Emily or Noah, I want to know yesterday." "Yes, sir." James hung up, anxiety thrumming in his chest. He hated sneaking behind Emily's back. But this wasn't about control. It was about safety. He was trying to build something fragile, and for the first time he wasn't doing it from steel and glass. Later that day, as he helped Noah color a solar system drawing, smearing crayon yellow across a cardboard sun, Noah looked up and said, "You're not bad at this, Dad." The word hit like thunder. James looked at Emily, who'd frozen mid-step from the kitchen doorway. Her eyes glossed over, just a little. "I mean," Noah added quickly, "you're still learning." James smiled, blinking against the sudden tears. "Yeah, buddy, I am, but I'm not going anywhere." And from the silence that followed, he could tell neither was Emily. Not yet, not completely. But maybe, just maybe, they were on their way. It was a Tuesday morning when James showed up at Emily's apartment with two things: coffee from her favorite local shop, the one with the cinnamon lids, and a folded piece of pale blue paper that had lived in his wallet for nearly a decade. It was creased and weathered, but it still smelled faintly like cologne and old hope. Emily opened the door cautiously. "You're early," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "I brought a peace offering." He held up the coffee cups like a truce flag. "You remember my order? Half the world changed, Em. Some things didn't." She took the cup silently, but her eyes were watchful. Noah was still asleep, his little sneakers lined up neatly at the foot of the couch. James lowered his voice. "I wanted to show you something." He unfolded the letter. "This is the one you left in my dorm room that summer. I never told you, but I kept it." Emily's eyes scanned the page. Her lips parted slightly as if the words were whispering something only she could hear. "I wrote that before I knew," she said softly, "before I found out about Noah." James nodded. "I know, but it still meant something to me. You said, 'Maybe you'll forget me, but I'll never forget the way you looked when you loved something. Completely, foolishly, all in.'" She laughed once painfully. "God, I was so young." "You weren't wrong." A long silence fell between them, weighted by everything unsaid. James took a breath. "Emily, I need to ask. Did my mother really pay you to disappear?" Emily didn't flinch. "Not at first," she said carefully. "But yes. She came to my apartment after I found out. I was pregnant. Said you'd never leave your world for mine. Offered to help cover medical bills if I walked away cleanly. No drama, no scandal." His jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. "She said you were about to close the Westbridge deal. That if I told you, it would derail everything. And I believed her." James sank onto the armrest, exhaling sharply. "I never got your letters," he said. "Not one." "Then she burned them." "Jesus, Em, I wasn't going to tell you. Not ever, but then you showed up again, and Noah, he deserves more than lies and legacy wars." James looked up, wounded but steady. "He deserves you, and he deserves me too." Emily blinked quickly and nodded. Just then, the soft thud of little feet on hardwood broke the tension. Noah emerged in Star Wars pajamas, hair sticking up like static. "You're here." He grinned at James. "Wouldn't miss it. James replied, standing. "I was thinking, if it's okay with your mom, I could take you to the science center today." Noah gasped. "The one with the rocket? And the robots?" James glanced at Emily, waiting for her answer. She hesitated for a breath. "Okay," she said finally, "but I'm coming too." As they drove through downtown Boston, Emily watched James interact with Noah in the rearview mirror. He listened intently to Noah's endless facts about comets and black holes, asking follow-up questions like it was the most important investor pitch of his life. At the museum, James and Noah knelt side by side, sketching their own version of the solar system at a craft station. Crayon smudges decorated James's cuffs. Noah's drawing was wobbly but proud. Sun, Earth, Saturn, and then two stick figures holding hands on Mars. James pointed. "Is that us?" "No," Noah said. "That's you and Mommy. I'm behind you, flying the ship." Emily leaned in, startled. "Why are we on Mars?" "'Cause Earth is boring," Noah said simply, then turned back to coloring. James and Emily looked at each other. Not a word exchanged, but a new tenderness had settled between them. Shared space, shared story. Back home, after putting Noah down for a nap, Emily found James still sitting at the kitchen table, quietly examining the drawing. "I've been thinking about custody," he said, not looking up. "Not full custody. Not court battles, just something official, something stable for him." Emily crossed her arms, defensive. "You want signatures?" "No, I want stability. For Noah. For you. For us. I'm not here to take him. I'm here to take responsibility." She studied him. "And if I say no? I'll still be here tomorrow," James said quietly, "and the day after that." The pause between them wasn't silence. It was something gentler, a recalibration, a fragile new orbit. Emily walked to the fridge, took out a bottle of juice, and set it in front of him. "Then you better learn how he likes his sandwiches." James smiled. "Let me guess. No raisins?" She grinned back, finally. Not even close. 2 weeks had passed, and James Carter's world looked nothing like it had before the accident, the one that had led him back to Emily and to Noah. His leather briefcase now shared space in the back seat with a crumpled Spider-Man backpack and a juice-stained copy of Goodnight Moon. His board meetings, once ironclad and sacrosanct, were now regularly rescheduled to accommodate bedtime stories and morning drop-offs. And, strangely, James didn't mind. Not even a little. But the world around him hadn't quite adjusted. Not yet. That Monday, James stepped into the sleek glass tower of Carter Tech's headquarters in downtown Boston. The marble floors echoed beneath his shoes, and the sterile air of corporate pressure greeted him like an old ghost. His assistant, Dana, walked briskly beside him. "You missed the strategy call with Hong Kong," she said flatly, not even looking up from her tablet. "I rescheduled," James replied calmly. "Tuesdays work better for me now." Dana blinked, thrown. "Since when?" James paused at his office door. "Since Noah." Her brow furrowed, but she said nothing. Inside his office, the boardroom lights were already on. 7 executives sat stiffly at the polished table, eyes flicking between their watches and the man who used to be early to every meeting by 10 minutes, minimum. "Mr. Carter," said Malcolm Reed, the CFO, with a tight smile. "Glad you could join us." James offered a brief nod, loosening his tie. "Let's keep it short today." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "We need to review projections for Q3. We're down 6% on international licensing. Also, some of the partners are concerned about your reduced availability." James looked him square in the eyes. "I'm still here. I'm just prioritizing a little differently." "And the rumors?" Malcolm pressed. "That you're, what, parenting now?" James gave a small smile. "They're not rumors." A stunned silence. "The truth is," he continued, voice steady, "I recently discovered I have a son. His name is Noah, He's 6, and yes, I'm learning how to be his father." Malcolm cleared his throat, visibly unsettled. "With respect, this is a publicly traded company. And, with respect," James cut in gently but firmly, "this company exists because I built it, and if investors want to sell because I'm reading bedtime stories, they're welcome to." Dana's eyes flicked up from her tablet, the corners of her mouth twitching. James leaned forward. "Gentlemen, if I can manage $1 billion company and still make it to kindergarten pickup, that's not weakness. That's balance." He stood. Meeting adjourned. Later that evening, James arrived at Emily's apartment with Thai takeout and a stuffed astronaut toy Noah had spotted online. He hesitated at the door for a second before knocking. Emily opened it in sweatpants and a messy bun, looking exhausted but soft-eyed. "He's in the bath," she said. "Told him you were coming. He picked out his pajamas just for you." James smiled warmly and handed her the takeout. "Food first?" "God, yes." They sat at the small kitchen table while Noah splashed in the tub, shouting periodically about shampoo planets and rubber duck invasions. "You okay?" Emily asked between bites of curry. James nodded. "I told the board." Emily paused, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "Told them what?" "That I'm a dad now, that my priorities have changed." Her eyes softened, her voice quieter. "That's big." James leaned back in his chair. It felt right, for the first time in a long time. Noah came racing out in rocket-printed pajamas, barefoot and beaming. "Daddy!" James knelt to hug him, heart twisting at how natural that word sounded now. "I made something for you," Noah said, darting back to his room. He returned with a drawing. A tall man, a little boy, and a woman with curly hair. 3 stick figures under a lopsided rainbow. At the top, in careful crayon, it said, "My family." James's throat tightened. "You're really good at these," he said softly. "I had help," Noah whispered, glancing at Emily. James looked at her, their eyes locking in a quiet exchange of gratitude and grief and possibility. After Noah was tucked in, snoring lightly beneath a rocket blanket, James lingered at the door. "He called me Daddy," he said. Emily smiled gently. "He meant it." James nodded, voice low. "So did I." She didn't stop him when he reached for her hand. And for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like distance. It felt like home. James stood outside the hospital's pediatric wing, knuckles white around a paper cup of now cold coffee. The corridor buzzed behind him. Nurses, doctors, the hum of monitors, the occasional beeping echoing off sterile walls. But inside him? Chaos, guilt, wonder, regret. The child he never knew existed had just changed the course of his life. When he stepped into Emily's break room, she was already seated, arms crossed, eyes glassy but unyielding. The clock on the wall ticked far too loud. "You had no right to keep him from me," James said first. His voice was low, but his words cracked with emotion. "I would have stepped up. I deserved to know." Emily didn't flinch. "And I deserved better than being bought off and lied to." James looked away, ashamed. "I didn't know. Not about Noah. Not about what my mother did." "She came to my apartment," Emily whispered. "Told me your future didn't include me. Said I'd ruin your name, your company, your life. She handed me a check and told me you agreed." James swallowed hard. "I didn't. I swear to God, Em." "I believe you now," she said slowly. "But believing doesn't erase the years I raised him alone, the nights I was terrified about his breathing and had no one to call." He stepped closer, cautiously. "Let me fix this." "No lawyers, James," she said firmly. "No legal documents, no PR spin. If you're serious about being in his life, you show up, quietly, consistently. That's the only thing Noah needs." "I don't want a court battle. I want to be his dad." Her shoulders dropped, tension dissolving slightly. "Then you start from scratch. like everyone else who meets their child for the first time. There was a long pause before she added, "He thinks you're just someone I know from college. He doesn't know the truth yet." James nodded. "That's your call, but I'd like to start being there now, if he'll have me." Emily looked up at him, searching, uncertain, and then, surprisingly, nodded. "Okay, but on Noah's terms." The next afternoon, James picked Noah up from his after-school art club. The boy bounded down the steps with his backpack bouncing and a half-finished solar system project in hand. "Mr. James," he grinned, his small hand gripping James's tightly. "Can we get ice cream?" James nearly choked on his breath. Mr. James, not Dad, not yet, but it was a start. "Yeah," James smiled. "I know a place." They sat on a green bench at the Christopher's Creamery in the South End, paper cups full of the melting vanilla and rainbow sprinkles. "I like Saturn the best," Noah said between bites, "because of the rings." "You know it's mostly gas, right?" James said with a raised brow. "Still, looks cool," Noah shrugged. "Emily says I look at everything like it's made of magic." James smiled, softening. "That's a good thing." Noah hesitated, digging his spoon into the ice cream, his voice quieter now. "Are you going to be around more? I don't have a lot of grown-ups that stay." James's throat tightened. "I'll be around as much as you want me to be." "Even on Tuesdays?" Noah asked, hopeful. "That's when I have asthma class. It's boring. You could come too." James nodded solemnly. "Tuesdays it is." That night, when James dropped him off, Emily watched from the window. The two of them laughing under a street lamp, Noah proudly showing James his Jupiter drawing. She placed a hand on her heart, tears silently falling. Not from pain this time, but from the possibility of something whole. Inside his car, James canceled a board trip to Zurich, then another to Tokyo. He scrolled down and found the number to his old pediatrician, tapping a note. Schedule Noah's allergy testing. He looked out the window and whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "I'm not missing another moment." And in that quiet Boston dusk, a father began to earn his place, step by painful, precious step. The sound of beeping monitors faded into the background as James sat beside Noah's hospital bed. A nebulizer mask clung gently to the boy's face, humming softly as it helped him breathe through a mild asthma flare-up. James's eyes were fixed on his son's chest, watching it rise and fall, steady, resilient, innocent. For all his years commanding boardrooms, managing crises, and building empires, nothing had ever felt more urgent or more real than this quiet moment. Emily stood by the window, arms folded, face unreadable. The tension between them had eased slightly over the last week, but a wall still lingered, built from old wounds and unspoken fears. "He's stronger than he looks," she finally said, her voice soft, almost fragile. James turned to her, nodding. "Yeah. He gets that from you." Emily's lips curled into the ghost of a smile, but she didn't look away from the streetlights outside. "He used to ask about you," she said. "Not often. Just once in a while. He'd say, 'Why don't I have a dad?' I never knew how to answer." James's throat tightened. He rose slowly and walked toward her. "And now?" Emily met his eyes. "Now he asks why you're still here." James exhaled. "Because I finally understand what it means to be a father. It's not about names on birth certificates or how many toys I can buy him. It's about pancakes at 7 a.m. It's asthma attacks and night lights and showing up every single time." Emily searched his face for a long moment. "And what happens when it gets hard again, James? When a meeting pulls you away? When the headlines scream your name and people start asking questions about us?" "Then I show up anyway," he said quietly. "No press release, no polished version of myself, just me. The man who should have fought for you 6 years ago, and who won't make the same mistake twice." There was something in his voice, a break, an honesty, that made Emily's eyes glisten. She looked away, blinking fast, and returned to Noah's side. Later that night, as they wheeled Noah out of the pediatric ward, he clung to James's hand with sleepy fingers. "Dad," he mumbled, eyes half closed, "can we build that rocket tomorrow?" James smiled gently. "You bet. We'll even add boosters." Emily watched the exchange quietly. When they reached the parking lot, she hesitated before handing James Noah's backpack. "Do you want to take him for the weekend?" she asked. James blinked. "Really?" She nodded. "You've earned that much. Just no junk food and bedtimes at 8:30. He laughed, overwhelmed. "Deal." Emily leaned in, brushing a kiss on Noah's head. "Be good for Daddy, okay?" Noah grinned. "Always." As James strapped his son into the back seat, his heart clenched. This wasn't just a visit. It wasn't a test. It was the beginning of something real. And it terrified him. But when Emily stepped back and said softly, "Drive safe," he felt a courage rise in him that had nothing to do with wealth or ambition. It came from the boy in the back seat, from the woman he never stopped loving, from the chance to rewrite everything. They didn't say goodbye, just a nod, a shared glance, a silent agreement that tomorrow and every day after would be different. And for the first time in 6 years, James Carter wasn't rushing toward a boardroom or chasing a quarterly goal. He was heading home. By the third Tuesday, James was the one waiting outside the classroom, holding a thermos of hot chocolate and Noah's favorite granola bar. Asthma class wasn't exciting, but it gave them rhythm, a reason, an excuse even, to build something ordinary between them. Emily noticed, quietly. She didn't say much, but she'd begun texting James reminders, doctor's appointments, art projects, science fair deadlines. Nothing overtly sentimental, but she didn't have to spell it out. The trust, once broken, was tentatively reforming. Noah was thriving too. He started drawing more, talking more, laughing with this new brightness that hadn't been there in months. One Thursday night, James knocked gently on Emily's apartment door. She opened it still in scrubs, hair pulled into a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. "I brought dinner," he said, lifting 2 takeout bags from their old favorite Thai place. "I figured you probably haven't eaten anything that didn't come out of a vending machine today." She stared at him a moment, then cracked a tired smile. "You're not wrong." They ate on the couch while Noah slept in the next room. Between bites of drunken noodles, James glanced around. The walls were filled with Noah's space posters and school photos. A Galaxy Mobile hung from the ceiling, still spinning gently. "You've done a beautiful job with him," he said, his voice low. "He's incredible." Emily looked down at her food. "I tried. Some days I felt like I was just guessing, hoping." James paused. "I've been reading about asthma, co-parenting, kids' books. I even bought one about parenting after trauma." She raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like you," he chuckled. "I'm trying, Em. I don't want to get this wrong." "You already did," she replied, not unkindly. "But now, you're trying to get it right. That counts for something." There was a long silence, one that felt safe for once, like the worst was behind them. Then James cleared his throat. "I've been thinking about the house in Beacon Hill." Her body tensed, but he rushed to explain. "Not for me, not anymore. I don't want that life, but it's too big and too empty, and I'd rather see it used for something that matters. I was thinking about starting a foundation, pediatric asthma research, in Noah's name." Emily blinked back surprise. "You'd do that?" "I'd do anything for him. I want to give him something that says, 'I see you, I value you, and I want the world to be better because you're in it.'" Emily swallowed hard. "You really mean that?" "I do." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Kay. That weekend, James and Noah spent the afternoon in the public garden. Noah brought his telescope in a little red wagon, eager to show James how he could find Jupiter in the daytime if you squint really hard. They ended up lying on the grass, trading ridiculous stories about alien cows and moon cheese. "Do you think we'll ever go to space?" Noah asked suddenly, turning to look at James. James smiled. "I think with you around, I'll go anywhere." Noah grinned. "Even to the dentist?" "Especially the dentist." They burst out laughing. Later that evening, when James dropped Noah off, the boy lingered at the curb. "Can you stay for story time?" he asked. "Mom does the voices, but you could try." Emily appeared at the door, arms folded, waiting. But she didn't say no. James glanced at her, uncertain. "Only if it's okay." She stepped aside. One chapter. Inside, the living room was dim, cozy. Noah ran ahead to grab a dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web. He patted the couch. "Here, you can be Wilbur." James smiled nervously, sat down, and began reading aloud. His voice cracked on the first few lines, unfamiliar with the cadence, the weight of bedtime. But Noah rested his head on his shoulder, and soon the rhythm came. Emily watched from the hallway, arms around herself, quietly absorbing the image. The boy, with the eyes like his father, and the man who had finally shown up. In that moment, it wasn't about the years lost. It was about the ones still ahead. A future stitched together, not by perfection, but by presence. James turned the page and kept reading, slower this time. He wasn't in a hurry. He was finally home. By early spring, the foundation James had promised was more than a quiet idea. It had a name, a board, a pediatric research team, and Emily's reluctant but proud blessing. It was called the Noah Project. James had repurposed the old Beacon Hill house, converting the library into a central planning space, the ballroom into a pediatric wellness hub, and the cold dining hall into a collaborative cafe for researchers and families alike. It was no longer a monument to his family's legacy. It was a promise that the future could be rewritten. But the ghosts of the past didn't give up easily. Margaret Carter had been silent since James's confrontation at her estate. Silent, but not still. Her lawyers had begun circling. Discreet phone calls. Old allies. Unspoken threats whispered behind boardroom doors. And then came the letter, delivered by courier, cream paper, gold-embossed initials. Her handwriting was as pristine and cold as her intentions. "James, you may cast me out of your life, but you will not dissolve my influence. The board is calling an emergency vote next month. Consider this your only warning. Legacy is not built on pity, it is built on power. You once understood that." Mother. James didn't flinch. He slid the letter into the fireplace of his penthouse apartment, watched the flames curl around the ink until it turned to ash, then picked up the phone. "Get everyone. Full meeting. Tomorrow." The next day, Emily sat beside him in the conference room of Carter Enterprises. Her posture was composed, but James could feel the nerves in her fingers, tapping, twisting. This was her first time in the space that once rejected her. Across the table sat old money faces, tight-lipped and calculating. At the end sat Margaret herself, poised in a navy silk blazer, her eyes flicking over Emily with quiet contempt. "The Noah Project is a misuse of Carter family capital," she said flatly. "It weakens investor confidence and undermines the firm's focus." James leaned forward. "The Carter legacy has always hidden behind polished walls. This is the first time it's done something real. A foundation built on scandal is better than one built on silence." Emily held her breath. Margaret's voice sharpened. "You think this emotional crusade gives you moral authority? You abandoned your role for a child that wasn't even acknowledged in our family." "He's acknowledged now," James said evenly, "and he's the best thing I've ever done." The room fell quiet. Even the boardroom AC seemed to pause. One of the younger board members, a woman in her early 30s named Clarissa, cleared her throat. "I've met Noah," she said softly. "He asked if stars are still burning after we stop seeing them. I think a legacy should do the same." Margaret's jaw clenched. Another member nodded. "The media buzz has been overwhelmingly positive. The Noah project could restore Carter credibility better than another failed merger." James folded his hands. "We're not asking for permission. Just don't stand in the way." Margaret stood abruptly. "Then consider this my formal withdrawal." Her heels echoed down the hall like a fading gavel. When the door shut, Emily let out the breath she'd been holding for 2 years. After the meeting, they stood on the rooftop balcony overlooking Boston Harbor. It was chilly, but the sky was blindingly clear. James glanced at her. "Was that too much?" Emily shook her head, tears brimming. "No, it was exactly enough." That night, James picked up Noah from his after-school science club. The boy came running, backpack swinging, cheeks flushed from excitement. "Guess what?" he grinned. "My drawing's going on the Foundation website, the one with the rocket and the teddy bear." James smiled. They'd be lucky to have it. As they drove home, Noah leaned his head against the window. "Do you think stars ever feel lonely?" James glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Maybe, but I think they stay strong because they know someone's always looking up." In the silence that followed, something unspoken passed between them. Not everything had to be said to be understood. That night, James helped Noah tape his drawing to the fridge. Emily watched them from the doorway, her two worlds finally aligned. No longer orbiting separately, but burning together. The weeks following Margaret Carter's resignation felt like spring breaking through after a long, bitter winter. The Carter board, freed from her icy grip, moved swiftly to support the Noah project. Fundraising soared. The pediatric wing's construction broke ground ahead of schedule. Headlines that once scrutinized James's every move now hailed his transformation from CEO to father. But the quiet moments, the ones without cameras, meetings, or strategy, were the ones that changed him. It was during one of those quiet moments, sitting in the back of a classroom at Beacon Hill Elementary, that James Carter realized something startling. He no longer thought of himself as the center of the story. He was no longer the empire builder, no longer the son trying to impress a legacy that never saw him. He was just a dad. That morning, Noah had begged him to come to school. "It's space presentation day. I get to be Mercury," he'd explained, proudly holding up a tinfoil-covered foam helmet. "Fastest one. Closest to the sun." James had canceled a quarterly strategy meeting with board members from Tokyo and Dubai. "Mercury outranks mergers," he'd told his assistant, then grabbed his coat and headed to the school with Noah humming beside him. Now, in a tiny plastic chair meant for someone 1/3 his size, James watched his son stumble nervously through the first few lines of his speech. He kept glancing at James, cheeks reddening, words sticking. Then James mouthed, "You've got this." Noah straightened. "Mercury orbits the sun every 88 days. That's super fast. He's small, but not weak, just really quick to show up when needed." The room clapped and James swore his heart had never swelled that big, not even when he'd rung the NASDAQ bell at his company's IPO. After the event, as they walked home with Emily, Noah skipped ahead, clutching a tiny certificate. "I used to think you were a storm," Emily said, her tone gentle, "always blowing through, making noise, then gone before I could breathe again." James paused. "And now, she said, slipping her fingers into his, "you're something solid, like gravity." They walked in silence for a few beats. Then Emily added softly, "I wasn't sure I could trust this. Trust you, but watching you with him, watching you become who he needed, it changed something." James's voice cracked. "I didn't just find a son, Emily. I found the person I was supposed to be all along." That night, as Emily worked a late hospital shift, James and Noah curled up on the couch with a blanket and a box of Cheez-Its. The movie was some animated space adventure, but they hardly watched it. They were talking about constellations again. "Do you think stars are like people?" Noah asked suddenly. "That even if they burn out, they still matter?" James didn't answer right away. He gently smoothed the boy's hair. "Yeah, buddy. I think the brightest ones leave light behind, even when they're gone." Noah's eyes flicked up. "Like Mom's dad? Or yours?" James nodded. "Exactly." Then, just as Noah's eyes began to flutter closed, he whispered something James hadn't expected. "Do you think I'm still your best discovery?" James kissed the top of his head. "You're not just my best discovery. You're my reason to discover anything at all." Later that night, James sat at his desk in the penthouse looking out over the quiet city. The lights of Boston twinkled like they were listening. On the screen was a final draft of a letter, one he'd read and rewritten 20 times. This version, though, felt right. To Noah, "You asked if stars matter after they fade. The answer is yes. You do. You always will. You changed the direction of my life, not with force, but with light. Quiet, constant, real. Being your father is the only title that's ever meant anything, and I'll never give it up. Dad," he printed it, folded it, slipped it into a small blue envelope and tucked it into Noah's backpack. It would wait there, quietly, patiently, for a day the boy might need it. Because some truths weren't meant to be shouted. Some were meant to be found, softly like stars. By mid-May, Boston had shrugged off the last shreds of winter. Trees along Commonwealth Avenue were thick with blossoms, and the air buzzed with the promise of something beginning. For James Carter, it wasn't just a season that had changed. It was his entire sense of purpose. Emily had taken a rare weekend off from her hospital shifts. Noah, now with a small gap in his smile thanks to a missing front tooth, was growing taller, bolder. He had begun drawing galaxies on everything. Napkins, mirrors, even James's laptop screen with dry erase markers. They'd planned a small project together, a rooftop garden. Not the sleek kind with imported stone and geometric shrubbery, but a messy, charming patch of life on top of James's penthouse, an idea Noah had pitched while eating Cheerios one morning. "I want to plant things that don't look perfect," he'd said. "Like Mom says, wildflowers don't ask permission. They just grow." So now, here they were, all three of them. Noah with dirt on his cheeks, Emily in cut-off jeans and a Red Sox tee, and James awkwardly trying to figure out how to hold a trowel without looking like he was about to perform surgery. They'd staked small wooden signs next to each plant. Lavender for calm, basil for pizza nights, a single climbing rose in honor of Emily's father, a patch of marigolds, because they look like little suns, Noah had explained seriously. But the centerpiece was a tree, a young dogwood, delicate and thin, its roots wrapped carefully in burlap. They'd saved it for last. Noah stood beside it, suddenly quiet. "Can we call this the memory tree?" he asked, glancing at James. "Like, if someone forgets something important, they can just come sit by it and remember." Emily's eyes shimmered. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." James crouched down. "I think that's the best idea anyone's had on this roof." They planted it together, Noah pressing the final scoop of soil around the trunk, and then sat on a worn blanket, drinking lemonade and listening to city noise float up from below. It could have been just another Saturday, but it wasn't. It was a marker, a small, quiet line drawn between before and after. Later that evening, as twilight washed the skyline in lavender, James found himself alone at the edge of the roof, looking out over the city that had built him and broken him more than once. Behind him, he heard the soft scuffle of sneakers. Noah appeared, holding something behind his back. "I made you something," he said. He held out a piece of thick cardstock. On it was a drawing, the three of them, standing beneath the dogwood tree. James was tall and smiling. Emily had flowers in her hair, and Noah, with his missing tooth and proud grin, held their hands. At the top, scrawled in all caps, was the title, "My Family, Finally." James took it slowly, his throat tight. "Thank you," he whispered. Noah climbed into his lap. "You're not just my dad," he mumbled sleepily. "You're my best friend." James held him close. It was in that moment, surrounded by stars just beginning to blink on overhead, that he realized the empire he'd once dreamed of couldn't hold a candle to this, not even close. He didn't need another IPO. He had a boy who believed in dogwood trees and second chances. He had a woman who'd forgiven him, gently, carefully, but completely. He had a roof full of messy plants that might not survive the first frost, but would be glorious until then. He had a family. The day began with the scattered clouds and the sound of sneakers tapping down the hospital hallway. But it wasn't the tense, sterile rhythm James Carter once associated with Massachusetts General. Today, it was joy in motion. Noah, dressed in a tiny navy blue blazer and clip-on tie, was practically skipping as he held a crumpled piece of construction paper. On it, in glitter pen and his best handwriting, were the words, "Welcome, baby star." Emily was in the maternity suite, her face flushed with equal parts exhaustion and euphoria, a tiny pink bundle nestled in her arms. James sat beside her, his shirt wrinkled and his hair messier than usual, because he'd slept on the pull-out couch every night for the past week. "She looks like you," Emily whispered, brushing her finger gently against their daughter's cheek. "Poor girl." James grinned, eyes glinting. "Hey, I'm told this face has potential." Noah tiptoed in, eyes wide, lips parted in awe. "Is that her?" Emily nodded. "Meet your sister, Lily Carter." Noah looked from his mom to James, then down at the baby, as if absorbing the gravity of the moment. Finally, with reverent care, he placed the glitter sign on the bassinet's edge and whispered, "Hey, Lily, I'm Noah. I've been waiting a long time for you." Tears welled up in James's eyes, and he instinctively reached for Emily's hand. She squeezed it tightly, softly, but with purpose. Later that afternoon, in a sunny corner of the maternity wing, the hospital held a small ribbon-cutting ceremony. It was intimate, with just staff, a few friends, and some media. A plaque was unveiled, mounted beside the entrance to a brand-new pediatric wing, funded by a private grant from James and Emily. The engraving read, "Noah's Wing, for every child who waited to be seen." As the crowd clapped and cameras flashed, Noah tugged at James's suit coat. "Can I say something?" he asked. James knelt beside him, heart thudding. "Of course you can." Noah walked to the small podium, barely tall enough to reach the mic. He cleared his throat nervously. "My name is Noah," he began, voice quivering slightly, "and this place is for kids who feel alone, or sick, or scared. But I want them to know they're not forgotten, because stars don't go away. They just hide until someone looks up." Silence followed, then thunderous applause. Emily clutched Lily tighter. James wiped his eyes and clapped so hard his palms stung. Later that night, back in their condo, Emily sat in a rocking chair with Lily nestled to her chest. Noah was in his room, drawing galaxies on the ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stickers. James stood in the kitchen, barefoot, brewing tea and humming a lullaby he didn't realize he knew. When the house finally quieted, they all gathered on the rooftop again, beneath the dogwood, now fully in bloom. James brought out a telescope. Noah adjusted it carefully, aiming it toward Orion's belt. 3 stars, he said, always orbiting each other. Emily looked over and smiled. That's us. James wrapped an arm around her, then pulled Noah into the hug. The city shimmered around them, but the quiet in that small space, beneath the blooms, beneath the sky, was louder than any skyline. Not everything had gone according to plan, but somehow everything had gone just right. Love hadn't come when expected. Family hadn't arrived on schedule. Forgiveness had taken years. And yet, here they were, flawed, real, stubborn, and somehow whole. James looked up one last time at the night sky, stars blinking like gentle reminders. Noah's voice floated beside him. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Do you think stars remember each other? James thought for a moment. I think the brightest ones never forget. The spring sun had returned to Boston like an old friend, warm, gentle, and long overdue. Cherry blossoms danced along Commonwealth Avenue, and the city, often gray and businesslike, now smiled in soft pinks and golds. James Carter stood just inside the new pediatric wing, fingers adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. His reflection in the glass doors didn't look like the man who once ruled boardrooms. He looked softer, still composed, still driven, but reshaped, carved by love and by time. The dedication ceremony was minutes away, and Noah, now 7, waited outside with a bundle of navy and silver balloons. He wore a bow tie he had picked himself and sneakers he refused to change out of. James had given up trying. Dad, Noah whispered, eyes sparkling as he looked up at the glass wall etched with his name. You nervous? James chuckled. Terrified. Noah laughed, slipping his small hand into his father's. Behind them, Emily approached, her steps slower these days, her hand resting protectively on her round belly. The pregnancy had been smooth, but it still left her tired in ways she hadn't expected. Ready to become a father? Again? She asked, teasingly, resting her head briefly on his shoulder. James kissed her forehead softly. I think I already am, twice over. The doors opened to applause. Cameras flashed, and the event began. Reporters jostled. Nurses smiled warmly. The board of trustees stood respectfully nearby, but it was clear who the real guests of honor were. The ribbon was long, silk, and glistening. Noah held the scissors with both hands, and with a nod from Emily, he cut through it in one confident motion. The crowd erupted into cheers. A brass plaque shimmered in the sunlight. Noah's Wing, dedicated to every child who waited to be seen, funded by the Carter Family Foundation. James stepped forward to speak. His voice, once used to closing billion-dollar mergers, now trembled with something far more powerful. Over a year ago, he began, I discovered the most important part of my life had been living just a few blocks from me. And I didn't even know it. I met my son. I re-met the love of my life. And I realized that success isn't about ownership. It's about stewardship. Not about control, but care. He paused, looking down at Noah, who beamed with shy pride. This wing isn't just for treatment. It's for hope. It's for children who need a moment of peace and joy in the middle of their storm. And it's for families like mine who got a second chance. Thunderous applause echoed through the atrium. Afterward, as the crowd mingled and took photos, James caught sight of Rachel, Emily's best friend and staunch protector. She approached, eyes a little glassy. "You really meant every word of that, didn't you?" she asked quietly. James nodded, earnest. Every single one. Rachel gave him a brief, tight hug. "Then I'm glad I didn't punch you the day you found out about Noah." James laughed, grateful, deeply, for how everything had unfolded, messy and miraculous. That evening, after the noise had faded and the guests had gone, James, Emily, and Noah walked slowly through the nearly empty wing. The lights were soft. The hallways smelled faintly of vanilla and lemon. Every door had a tiny star above it. Noah's idea. They entered room 103, where the first young patient, a girl named Maya, had just been admitted. She was shy, her parents exhausted. James introduced them gently, leaving behind a stuffed bear, a card, and a promise to visit again. Back at home, James tucked Noah into bed. "You were amazing today," he said, brushing Noah's hair back. "You know that, right?" Noah yawned and nodded. "I liked when everyone clapped, but my favorite part was the stars above the doors." "Why's that?" Noah's eyes fluttered half shut. "So, kids know they're not in the dark. Not really." James sat there long after Noah drifted off, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's chest. In the next room, Emily hummed to their unborn daughter as she folded tiny baby clothes. And James, once a man obsessed with legacy, finally understood it. Legacy wasn't a building, or a surname, or a billion-dollar valuation. Legacy was a boy who called him Dad, a woman who forgave him, and a family he would never take for granted again. 2 years later, the Carter home was no longer defined by polished silence or echoing halls. It was filled with small footsteps, scattered Legos, half-finished puzzles on the coffee table, and the steady rhythm of a life reclaimed. Noah, now almost 9, stood by the living room window, his hand pressed against the glass. The sky had just turned violet, and the first few stars blinked into existence. "Dad," he called softly, "I found Orion." James looked up from the floor, where baby Lila had finally drifted off in his lap. He smiled, tired and full. "Show me." They moved to the window together. Noah pointed out the constellation with his flashlight, tracing lines between stars the way Emily used to trace his freckles with her fingers. Late at night, back when they were just beginning, James saw more than the sky. He saw what they'd built, not by force, not by fortune, but by forgiveness. Down the hall, Emily was finishing up a bedtime story. Her voice drifted into the room in soft cadence, reading a picture book about rocket ships and stardust. James listened, thinking how strange it was that the most important legacy he'd ever have didn't involve his company, his inventions, or even the wing named after his son. It was this: a home that felt like breath. A boy who laughed again. A woman who looked at him like he'd finally come home. As Noah went to brush his teeth, James carefully lifted Lila and took her to the nursery. Her room was painted in soft moonlight grays and lavenders, with plush animals arranged like tiny guards. A nightlight glowed faintly, a gift from Noah, who insisted it should be shaped like Saturn. James tucked her in and lingered, watching her chest rise and fall, just as he used to with Noah. When he stepped into the hallway, he found Emily leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed gently, her face relaxed in the kind of peace you only get after surviving the storm. "You're good at this now," she whispered. James smirked. "I had the best crash course." They walked back to the kitchen together. There, resting on the fridge, was a photo Noah had drawn and clipped with a magnet shaped like a rocket. 3 stick figures held hands under a starlit sky, one big, one medium, one tiny. The caption underneath, written in crooked kid handwriting, read, "My family, always orbiting." James leaned his forehead against the fridge for a moment, silently overwhelmed. Emily touched his back. Still afraid you'll mess it up? Every day, James admitted, his voice raw. But now I know something I didn't before. What's that? That love isn't about never making mistakes, it's about choosing to show up after you do. Emily reached for his hand. You keep showing up. They stood there for a moment longer, no need to say more. In the weeks that followed, James slowly stepped away from day-to-day operations of his company. His board protested at first, but his investors backed him. He wasn't retiring, just redirecting. He launched a new initiative through the Carter Foundation, supporting single parents, offering free legal advocacy for unwed mothers, and launching mobile pediatric clinics across underserved neighborhoods. Noah cut the ribbon at the first mobile clinic, holding his sister's hand while cameras flashed. James stood behind them, not in the spotlight, but where he belonged, in support. Months later, during a quiet evening in the garden, Noah looked up from his homework. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Do you think everyone gets a second chance? James paused. No, I think they're rare, and you have to fight for them. Noah nodded. I'm glad you did. James bent down and kissed the top of his son's head. So am I. The stars overhead shimmered like quiet applause. The family of 3, no, 4, sat under the open sky, tracing new constellations with their eyes, drawing new paths with their hearts. And as the world turned beneath them, slow and steady, James Carter knew with absolute certainty. He hadn't just changed his life, he had found it.